10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
You have entered Untold Radio AM. And now broadcasting from a secret location, your hosts, Joel Sturgis and Doug Hajicek.
Hey, welcome to Untold Radio. Hey, Alex, how are you?
Hey, good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm beat up today. I worked till 6 this morning. Then I had an early morning meeting with my TV agent and 2 people from England, so our times are all screwed up. But we sold a project to A&E today. It's kind of an acquisition on a project, Big Cat Mysteries. Britain's Big Cat Mysteries, so that'll air in Blaze TV in October. So that was kind of cool. It's been a while since I've sold anything to the TV world.
Well, this must just be a super stressful process.
It's not easy. People think, it's, you just whatever pitcher. Certainly somebody like myself. I mean, I've had a number of hit TV shows. And even for me, you still have a tiny chance at, pitching something and getting it. They claim the chances for like somebody who doesn't have any TV credits, it's 1 in 250,000.
250,000.
Yeah, to get a show on the air. So you're already batting, to come up with an idea that's plausible with the right timing, where everything is just perfect, kind of the perfect storm where, a TV station will buy the show. And, I've been lucky numerous times, but it's not easy. So anyhow, enough of that. But so it was a good day, but
yeah, absolutely.
I'm just like, if I look across, I haven't even had a shower or anything. I just like, and then me and your brother went today and we were working on that UTV. So it's a side-by-side 4-wheel drive vehicle that we're planning on doing research with. And we're trying to invent a new type of windshield for it. And so it's a slow process. We've been there twice, both times spending like 5 hours. But today we actually had a breakthrough because we're planning on marketing a new type of windshield that goes from $300, $400, $500, I've seen them as high as $600. We're trying to get them under $100 for people.
So they're affordable.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. These poor people spend tens of thousands on these things, and then you all of a sudden realize, oh crap, this doesn't have a windshield. Now you're looking at another $1,000, to get a windshield, and we're just trying to come up with a bunch of parts that are more affordable. So using our creative, inventive skills, but we have this new type of it's a kind of, I guess it's a polymer, but it's very hard but very flexible. And it's really cool. It's cool stuff. Anyhow, so what else is going on? We have winter that's never going to go away, as you know. Ever. I have a pile of snow in my yard. I swear, because the plows bring it in. Because I live, in an area where they just decide to plow it in my yard. It's literally probably 12 feet tall now of snow in my yard.
Oh yeah, it's stacked high.
It's not, and it's March. And I remember a lot of Marches, like even by March 10th, where it's, the grass is already starting to green up and it's raining every day. So somebody moved, by the way, somebody moved my mixer board. I won't say who, over on the left side. So I keep whacking my own cord, my own earphone right out of my ear. Before it was on the right side, it was out of my way, and now it's on the left side. And so if you ever see me go whack, because my own arm is whacking my earphone out. Okay. So the other day, me and your sister, Alex, we're going to make some hash browns for breakfast, right?
Oh no, I already see where this is going.
And I go into the pantry to get the potatoes, and I'm like, damn, they look good last time I saw them. And they were like buds coming out of them. And when you grab them, you can kind of feel they're a little mushy and a little wrinkly. And I'm looking at AJ and I'm going, are these safe to eat? And she goes, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I don't know either. You know, I really crap off, you know. But then I remembered potatoes are a member of the deadly nightshade family. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Yeah, they're toxic. I mean, they actually come from a highly toxic plant. So, so I'm thinking, well, thinking back, you know, I'm like, maybe not. So we just, out of caution, we threw them away, right? So we didn't get potatoes with our breakfast. So I went ahead and I thought, well, I'm going to learn about potatoes because I don't want to die doing something stupid like that. You know, killing my own daughter with feeding her some poisonous plant. And the more I read about potatoes, because I've never taken the time to read about potatoes, we all eat tons of potatoes. I mean, you have no idea how many billions of pounds of potatoes this country eats. So I'm looking up stuff, facts, and I thought, well, I'm going to share some of this stuff. One, you never know, this could save somebody's life. And you know, I'm always, Alex, if you listen to the show ever, I'm constantly having cooking problems.
Yes.
Constantly. I mean, I just keep screwing stuff up. And so I thought, well, you know, I'll try to save somebody's life or maybe save them from food poisoning. Okay. So we all eat a ton of potato. I got to get my notes here because, boy, that's a lot of cool facts. We all eat damn near all of us eat a ton of potatoes per year. That's insane. Think about that. Obviously some more than others. Definitely me. I'm one of them. Okay. But the potato is the most important non-cereal crop in the world. And I thought, well, I wonder who grows the most potatoes. Guess who it is? Would you know? Take a guess. What country in the world grows the most potatoes?
Russia?
No, not even. Well, you're kind of close, but no, it's China.
It's China.
And potatoes are cool because, and I didn't know this either because I always thought of them as junk food. You get guilty. The potato is one of the only foods that you could just live on and not eat anything else because they have almost every essential vitamin for life.
I had no idea.
I didn't either until I read it. That's why I'm passing this great knowledge on, this great internet knowledge. And once again, just don't think I go to one page and get this stuff. I might have to go to 10 sites to pull all this stuff together. Apparently nobody's interested in potatoes. Okay. The world's largest potato was 18 pounds, 4 ounces.
Wow.
Don't drop it on your foot. It's as big as a watermelon. Big as a big watermelon. Potatoes' roots trace back to Peru, you know, where the Inca natives were the first to grow the crop. The potato, despite its appearance, is 80% water and only 20% solid. And so a potato only has 100 calories for an average sized potato. But not when you go to Five Guys and they've processed them in whatever peanut oil or whatever they fry them in. Guaranteed they've added a few more calories. But we're talking about just, you know, maybe a baked potato. You eat it and there's no butter or sour cream or whatever on it. Okay. So I thought that was interesting. 100 calories. That's pretty cool. Let's see here. Potato varieties have grown over the centuries. There's 100 different types of potatoes.
100 types.
I always thought there was like, you know, the Idaho potato and sweet potato and whatever, but there's 100 different kinds. Okay. So apparently there was a man, Antoine Augustine Parmentier Tintier. He was trying to popularize potatoes in France. So he planted this garden and he put guards all around it, right? And he told the guards to accept bribes and everything to let people steal the potatoes. He wanted them, it's kind of that forbidden fruit.
Forbidden fruit.
Yeah. So he told the guards secretly to accept all bribes and allow people to steal the crop, and it increased the popularity of potatoes in France. Thought, well, what the heck? That's kind of weird. Anyhow, let's see here. Can you think of 2 nicknames, Alex, for potatoes? Probably not. 2. Come on.
Spud.
That's 1. That's good. That's 1. That's another one.
I'm out.
Taters.
Tater. Oh yeah.
Yep. Okay, so remember the question about the wrinkled potatoes. Yes, do not eat wrinkled potatoes. That is the sign they've turned toxic. So if you got a potato and they have buds, apparently you can cut them off and potatoes still firm and not wrinkled. But if they're wrinkled, they can actually be quite poisonous and can cause death. Okay. Ooh, nice sound effect there. That was
spooky.
I think that was a spooky one. Yeah. Okay. All right. There's a potato museum in Idaho. I had no idea. I don't even want to go there. I would never go there. Would you ever go to the potato museum? You're driving by. I mean, you got to be bored to go to the potato museum.
I mean, depends what kind of candy they have there. How long is this road trip?
I don't know. Well, let's go. Yeah, we can. I'll go there. I'll go to the potato museum. We'll drive. It's in Idaho. It'll take us a day.
I mean, okay. If you're there.
Okay, so the potato plant is part of, they call it this, and I don't know how to pronounce it, the Solanaceae or the nightshade family. It says the starchy edible tubers are the main reason why they are widely grown. Obviously, the potato is the fruit and consumed, but obviously you can get poisoned because they're part of the nightshade family. In fact, I did get poisoned from potatoes.
You did? You got poisoned? I
was poisoned from a homemade drug that was apparently made from potatoes, is what I was told by the Turkish doctor that nursed me back to health. But I was fed some type of a poison that was made. They said it was poison that some grandparents or parents will use to euthanize their children if they're starving. And I thought, God, that's sad. And it had been, and I actually was given this drug made from potatoes on purpose. And I can tell you that it was not fun. I mean, it took me, I don't know, at least a month and a half to recover. And actually, you were a little kid, and I was still hallucinating when we closed on the home. I think we were selling the home in Forest Lake, and they actually had to lock me in a separate room for that closing because I was still hallucinating so bad. Yeah, and this was after I got back home, and I had spent time in getting 24-hour care in Turkey, and they found me on the street completely. I was gone. I mean, I was actually on a bench, passed out.
Was that in Russia?
Yeah, it was in Russia.
Russia.
Yeah, it was bad news. But I had passed out somewhere. Oh, yeah. Anyhow, the whole idea is, man, potatoes can be bad. At one time, potatoes were worth gold.
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, they actually were. They were actually sold. You know, they would, like in Alaska, they would buy them potatoes with gold. It's amazing if you could imagine that. Okay, so one could suffer from potato poisoning upon consuming leaves, green stems. These parts contain toxic solanine, which could cause potato plant poisoning with symptoms such as abdominal pain, fever, nausea, headaches, vomiting. And it can take up to 8 to 10 hours from consumption before the onset and signs of it. Let's see here. So it's important to include the potato skin, though, in the preparation process, because that's where a lot of the vitamins is in the skin. Yep. I think everybody's probably heard that. But you shouldn't wash your potatoes prior to storing because they'll go bad. So don't do that. Wash them right before you cook them.
Right before.
Yep. Let's see here. Oh, apparently there are 5,000 known varieties. In other words, like sub-varieties that like culinary experts will go after. You know, if you're paying your $500 meal in LA, then they'll give you a certain type of potato. subspecies.
That's subspecies.
But it says here, potatoes can grow up to altitudes of 15,420 feet. That's crazy. That's cold. That's above sea level. You can live off potatoes. I already told you that. Over 1 billion people eat at least one potato a day. 1 billion people.
1 billion.
Yeah, I'm part of that group. Swear, I know I am. Okay. I don't know. Yeah, I'm getting bored with me. Oh, there's actually they took and genetically crossed a tomato and a potato, half and half, and they call it the tomato.
The tomato?
Tom-tato. That's what it's called.
Tom-tato. Have you had a Tom-tato?
I haven't had one.
Would you be willing to eat it?
Sure, I'd try it. I'll try anything. And they call it the palmato. I don't know. I can't read this crap. So they grafted a potato plant with a tomato plant. Apparently it worked. Okay, now we're getting weird. There's the National Potato Day, and I don't have any idea what day it is, and I don't care.
There's a National Potato Day.
Yes, there is, and I don't care what day it is. It could be today for all I know.
Do people get that off as a holiday? Somewhere?
Maybe that's why I'm doing this. It's National Potato Day. I care less. Okay, let's see. Oh my God. It says such greatness can't go unobserved aside from celebrating National Potato Day. It's every August 19th. In fact, the United Nations declared 2008 is the official year of the potato.
The official year.
Yeah, the UN did. Yeah. And so, of course, you can make French fries, hash browns, chips from potatoes that we eat, our naughty food. We turn good food to naughty food. Let's see here. Potatoes will boost your metabolism.
They will.
Yeah. Are you bored yet? Are you bored?
No. I want to hear more about potatoes.
I'm dying here. I can imagine everybody's like, they just shut off. Okay. So we're talking about potatoes. And then, of course, I'm wondering, I wonder if there's been any Bigfoot seen in potato fields or eating potatoes.
Do Bigfoots eat potatoes?
Well, I wonder that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So we did a little checking, and I found out there was a sighting in a garden where somebody actually observed a Bigfoot eating potatoes.
He was eating a potato.
He was eating potatoes.
Several.
Yeah, many. Yeah. Yep. And they've calculated that Bigfoot probably needs 40 to 50 pounds
40
of food, veggies or whatever.
Yeah.
And that would be easy to get that much potatoes. Wouldn't take that much, would it?
So what do they think the primary diet is of Bigfoots? Is that berries?
I think it's just kind of a omnivorous diet, just everything, kind of like bears. They'll go from berries to bugs to plant material to flowers to, insect pupae to killing and eating fawns. I'm sure they eat fish, kind of like humans, just whatever's in the pantry.
Whatever they can get a hold of.
Whatever's in the pantry at the moment, that's what a bear will eat. Yep.
You think they'll
nuts,
eat
acorns, and the weird thing is, if you try to feed a bear, let's say you put food out for a bear every day, tons of food, unlimited, could just sit there and eat. They usually will only stay there a little while and move on to go get their wild foods.
But they graze.
Yep, they graze. Yeah, they won't park there. They'll come by to that feeding station every day, but they'll just stay a little while and they'll leave. So it's interesting about bears. And then we were talking about toxic foods, and this actually happened this week. I read this, where and this is so sad, a 19-year-old kid, right? He was admitted to the hospital after experiencing deadly symptoms that required doctors to amputate both his legs, all his fingers, from just eating leftover rice. So if we're talking Yeah, and apparently he just left it on the counter, didn't refrigerate it. And there's a type of bacteria that builds up in rice, and I can give you that, not anybody cares. But it's basically Bacillus cereus, but that bacteria produces a toxin, right? It isn't the bacteria that kills you, it's this toxin they produce, and then it causes this meningococcal disease. So this poor kid just innocently goes, oh, I don't want to waste this Chinese, it was takeout food, I guess, chicken and rice. He left it in the thing, went to bed, got up in the morning, there it was, reheated it, ate it, and just think about the horror that poor kid went through. God, it's horrible.
Well, there goes all my leftovers.
Oh, yeah. And, that's once again, I feel like, yeah, people should know this. I did not know that.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it is actually. And I had no idea. I mean, that's my worst nightmare right there. And then, of course, we're talking about, this poor kid. And literally, and this just happened by accident, because I think Google or whatever, they spy on you. This thing came up about human feet that keep washing ashore in this one bay, and I think it's in Canada. Yeah, it's in the Salish Sea in Canada. Apparently the currents are correct, and it keeps bringing these amputated feet. Into this, they wash up, and they're still in the shoe.
In the shoe.
Yeah, in a shoe. And they just like, what the heck? They've actually had 21 have washed up between 2007 and 2019. And it was a huge mystery until somebody figured it out. Basically, apparently in 2007, they started incorporating flotation foam in tennis shoes.
Flotation foam.
Oh, yeah, like an EVA foam.
Yep. So,
like the foam that's they put in flip-flops.
Yep.
It's that kind of a foam they started incorporating in tennis shoes, and probably to keep getting them more comfortable, which they've done a great job on that. But anyhow, so apparently they figured out that people die in the ocean. God knows, all over the world.
Yep.
They end up in the ocean. They sink. Critters start gnawing on them, but they can't gnaw on the stuff they get their shoes, right? They're dead, but their shoes are on.
Yeah.
And eventually they gnaw off the rest of the body gets eaten, and all that's left is the shoes. And guess what? They pop up, Alex, to the surface. Horrible. And then they get caught in this current, this world current, the jet streams of the ocean, and it carries them to this bay in Canada. It's just nuts. I mean, it really is nuts. Yeah. It's weird. I mean, the world is weird. But anyhow, at least somebody figured it out. Because I remember reading about that a long time ago going, what the heck? Is there a serial killer? And since we're talking about ocean, I'll do this nice smooth segue. Also on things I did not know. There I did it. I just yanked my headphone right out of my... Oh, my God. I'm funny. Okay. I didn't know that all mammals swim, including bats. I didn't know bats. That was the one I was shocked on. A bat, they swim perfectly.
I didn't know they could swim.
And they swim great. And they swim often.
Really? They actually swim often?
Oh, sure. She had to bathe and all sorts of stuff, yeah. I didn't know that. Who would have thought? If I saw a bat swimming in the lake, swimming, that would be the end of me right there. That would be the end of me. And I thought, so, yeah, they swim really well. So bats, sloths swim, hyenas swim. Hyenas even dive. Like they'll dive into those watering holes in Africa to eat carrion that's died or been killed, that maybe was injured by a lion, whatever, ran into the water hole for safety, died. The hyenas will dive into there looking for carrion down 20 feet deep.
20 feet?
A hyena diving.
I didn't know that.
What other show are you going to learn this crap at?
Only but here.
On
Untold Radio, AM.
Exactly. Okay. I just thought it was weird. Okay, so they call Camels swim really good. Who would have thought that? They call camels that swim sand donkeys.
Sand donkeys.
Yeah, they swim. I don't know. I just thought that's weird. And then moose can dive also down to 20 feet deep.
20 feet.
And that's quite a ways down.
Yeah, that's deep.
I'm just like, what the heck? If you were a skin diver and all of a sudden you turn around and there's a moose standing next to you, you're down at the bottom of the lake.
What do you do?
Oh my God. And then I was reading about dolphins. This is the rabbit hole that I go down, right? I don't stop. This is why probably sometimes I don't get enough sleep. So I'm reading about dolphins, and I'm reading about this incident in France. I believe it was 2014, where 1,100 mutilated dolphins washed up on shore. That were mutilated, like
just mutilated,
jaws cut off, fins all cut off. It's like really weird stuff, like almost alien type injuries, like cattle mutilations. And I think, oh, well, that's kind of weird, right? And of course, the skeptics go, well, it must be fishermen doing it. Really, to 1,100 dolphins? Is anybody really that mean? No. One, how are they going to, dolphins get caught in fishermen nets at times. But 1,100 showing up all at once, all mutilated, that sounds like something out of this world to me. To me it does. And I've even, years ago, and I didn't have time to find the article. I didn't even look for it. But I remember once reading that there was a number of dolphins, I think it was around the Iceland area, around Reykjavik area. Well, Reykjavik's, I guess, the capital of Iceland, but the oceans around Iceland, that they had found whales and dolphins that were mutilated with like eyes removed, tongue removed, the anal area cored out, like really weird stuff. And I'm like, ooh, that is creepy. Because we hear about, cows getting mutilated. But water animals, I don't know. Just thought, well, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's always weird. They always blame. They got to blame somebody,
Of course.
And then so dolphins get, this terrible things happen to 1,100 dolphins. And obviously, yes, dolphins do wash up shot and tortured, but usually it's one or two, right? It isn't 1,100 of them.
It's a lot.
And then I started reading. Of course, I'm just going down the rabbit hole. I'm taking you with me. Then I was reading about dolphins kidnapping people in the open oceans. And I went, what? In this article I read it, and I read it in a number of articles, it said there's 14 cases of dolphins grabbing people, open water swimmers, and they're never found again.
Never found again.
Dolphins. We always think, oh, yeah, they're so cute. And, I just saw a TikTok video the other day where somebody dropped their, phone in the water and the dolphin brought it back, they're sweet. But apparently these rogue males will get together. There'll be like 20 of them, and they'll go around looking for, I don't think they mean to rape humans, but apparently they'll grab people with their penis, because they're getting frisky or whatever. And people are just like taken down deep. So the scientist, and I don't know if any of this crap's true, right? I'm getting it off the internet. So apparently scientists set up decoys out in the open water with humans, dummies that look just really detailed, that look like humans, to see if this is true.
To see what happens.
Apparently they observed these dummies getting like molested and then kidnapped and gone. Yeah. Yep.
That is so crazy.
By these rogue male dolphins. Yeah. It's like they're like a gang of single male dolphins. So if you're out swimming, you get grabbed by the wrist or the waist by a dolphin penis, that's not a good thing. You want to get away quick. Yep.
It looks like it's time to bring on our guest.
Oh my God. Oh yeah, we didn't even mention your guest. So I'm just gonna tell you what I know, then you can read his bio.
Sure.
So it's Brian King Sharp. He is the host and obviously the owner of Sasquatch Odyssey. And Brian, I know Brian pretty well. He's just like the nicest guy ever. I know he's an ex-policeman. I guess he had quite a difficult job being a policeman in Atlanta, but he's just super nice guy. So why don't you read his bio and then we'll bring him on.
Sure. So Brian King Sharp is the host of the Sasquatch Odyssey Podcast and the Paranormal Odyssey Podcast. He has had an interest in the paranormal and cryptids since a very early age. Growing up in the North Georgia mountains as a child, he grew up constantly hearing tales of Bigfoot and wild men. At the age of 12, he had an experience of his own, and it ignited a lifelong journey of seeking answers to the seemingly unanswerable. Eventually moving away from his hometown, he started a 16-year career in law enforcement in Atlanta, Georgia. Although he enjoyed his time in the public service, in 2016, he made a decision to leave it behind and start a new chapter in his life. Purchasing a few vintage VWs, he enjoyed camping and living out of a camper bus for a bit of time. Eventually, he purchased almost 40 acres of property in the North Carolina mountains and began the journey of building a homestead. For the first year, he lived completely off the grid in the woods. And recently he completed a tiny house, is now settling in the woods. His encounter with unseen forces in his childhood home and seeing a UFO at age 16 have always remained a huge part of his life. It made it clear to him that there was more to the world, more than he could simply comprehend. The journey eventually led him to start the Sasquatch Odyssey and Paranormal Odyssey podcast. Together, the shows have allowed him to meet a diverse and amazing group of people who have shared their personal experiences. The Odyssey continues as Brian's personal quest for truth and to find the answers we all seek.
Brian, are you there?
I am here, Doug. How are you?
Oh, Alex, why don't you click me off so we can see? There you are.
How you doing, Brian?
I'm good. It's good to meet you, Alex.
Yeah, good to meet you too.
So, you've done podcasts before besides your own where you're going to get grilled with a bunch of questions, or?
I have. I recently did. I did D.A. Roberts' show, D.A.
Okay.
Ex Machina. That was an interesting show. That was a good time.
Very cool.
I was up way past my bedtime for that one.
Did they get any good information out of you?
Not a ton, actually. Not a ton. I'm not necessarily full of great information, but you can do your best, Doug. If anybody can do it, it'll be you.
Well, one of the first questions I want to know is, why did you get into law enforcement? I mean, that's a dangerous, I don't think you make enough money considering the danger, especially nowadays when you were a law officer. It's different being maybe a sheriff in a tiny town, but Atlanta, that's a big city. So why did you get into that, Brian?
It was one of those things. It was, if you used to ask me as a child what I wanted to be when I grew up, it was a cop. And I don't know why. I didn't have any law enforcement in my background, family, anything like that. It was just something that I always wanted to do. And I don't know. I wanted to police in a big city. So Atlanta was the obvious choice. I grew up in North Georgia. So Atlanta was the closest, biggest city that I could apply for. And I applied for other smaller jurisdictions, and some of them actually called me, but I kind of held out for the city of Atlanta, and they hired me, and the rest is history. I enjoyed my time there. It was a tough gig for sure, but I had a interesting dynamic of people that you meet there. It's great. I enjoyed it immensely, but it was definitely time to go.
What kind of shifts did they make you work? When you're a law officer in Atlanta?
Well, I started on morning watch, which is like the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. So that's usually when you come out of the academy, you're on nights most often. Like, it's not a day watch right out of the academy. Some people look up and get that, but I was on morning watch for like 3 years, the first 3 years of my career there. I did a lot of DUI. That was my thing. I could spot a drunk driver from like 10 miles away. I don't know why I have this knack for it, but
yeah.
And I eventually became a DUI instructor, which I really enjoyed. And I think my favorite part of the job was being an FTO. I was a field training officer, and I got to train the new recruits. We have a 6-month paramilitary academy in Atlanta. And when they come out of the academy, you have to ride with a certified FTO for 12 weeks, and they would rotate 2 weeks on with somebody and then go to another zone. And I really enjoyed that part because I got to spend time with some new people and sort of talk to them about the way I did the job and how they plan to approach the job. It was pretty cool.
So did you ever see anything weird on your job? I mean, just something that was like kind of shocking that you just can't forget? I mean, was there a certain day where you just went, oh my God?
There was tons of days where I had interesting things happen. People have asked me on other shows when I've been on other podcasts and whatnot, and they've asked me if I've seen anything paranormal. And I never did that I knew of. But you see a lot of interesting things when you're working morning watch in the city of Atlanta. I think one of my favorite things that I used to joke about was I called it the zombie walk at 3 a.m. I worked in the bar district down in Buckhead. Anybody who's familiar with the Atlanta area knows where Buckhead is.
I've been to Buckhead.
And I used to sort of sit outside the bars and wait on them to let out. And it was just always amazing to me to see the people stumbling down the road at 3 a.m. And I thought, what are they doing with their life? But yeah, I saw a lot of interesting things, a lot of horrible things. You know, you as a cop, it's nobody calls 911 when you're having the best day of your life. It's always when something's going on and you just kind of see people at their worst. And that gives you the opportunity to, you know, treat them fairly and hopefully help them through whatever they're dealing with.
So I would imagine you didn't get into Bigfoot because you just saw a TV show, or was it that simple? You just got interested in it, or did you have a sighting?
Well, I grew up in the North Georgia mountains, and I heard stories about Bigfoot and people who had encounters and things like that. So it was on my radar as a kid, but it wasn't until we were in a house and I was about 12 years old when I had an experience. I've never saw one. I've never had a sighting, but I've had some experiences there that I've talked about on my show and other shows where I believe I was paced out of the woods by one of these things. Or something huge and bipedal that bluff charges and huffs and grunts and growls. And so, yeah, that sort of really sparked that interest for me. And at the time I had no idea what it was. And I still frankly don't know if it was a Sasquatch or what it was, but it sort of pushed me on to attempt to find out what it might've been. And it's funny that I was on a show, oh God, it was last year at some point in time. I don't know. I don't even remember the name of the show, honestly, but the guy who was the host of the show asked me, you know, we had talked about some of the things that had gone on. We lived in a haunted house and I had some very dark experiences there. And his name was Charlie. And Charlie asked me, do you think the experience that you had in the woods could have possibly been something more supernatural or malevolent? Maybe one of the dark forces that you were dealing with in the house manifesting itself and doing those things in the woods, and instead of it being a Bigfoot or whatever you think it was. And it was a very interesting question. I'd never been asked that before, and I never even considered that as an option. But those experiences, and then that experience with what I believe to be a Sasquatch and some other experiences in my life that I've had have really pushed me down that path to really explore the subject. And I've always, I mean, who's not into Bigfoot really? I mean, I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film when I was, you know, when we got the internet and I was able to look it up. And once I saw that, I was like, holy shit, this could be real. And that just sort of sent me down that path that I'm still on. Still don't know.
Yeah. And when you see the Patterson film, it's kind of that 3-second rule. You know, it's like, that's a real animal. Did you get that sense too when you saw it? Just that right away, you just knew this is weird.
Yeah, I've always went back and forth, and I've had so many debates with people on my show, and I've done shows specifically about, you know, the controversy around the Patterson-Gimlin film. Is it real? Is it not? Those kind of things. And I tell you, I've always ended up, no matter where I go, I always land back on, I believe that that's a real creature. You know, and I'll watch it 2 or 3 more times, or I'll have a conversation with somebody and I'll go back and look and I'm like, well, you know, I just don't know. But, you know, having a conversation with Jeff Meldrum and some of the other people I've talked to that you, Doug, frankly, you know, you were instrumental in that as well. Some of the things that you point out and, you know, Jeff points out, it's undeniable. It's at this point for me that that's a real creature. I mean, it took me a while to get there, but that's sort of where I've come down now.
Yeah, and I even though I'm there too, of course, I've seen these things. You still have those days where you go, it just can't be. It's just there's no way it can be. But then you go back and you go talk to another witness, and you're right back to 100% believer again. But do you ever have those just a little bit of doubt?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
I interview people 3-4 times a week, for the show, and now I'm doing 3 podcasts, so I'm interviewing somebody almost every day for one of those 3 shows. But yeah, I have those moments. You talk to people and they tell you some of these most incredible encounters, and you're just like, you scratch your head and say, how in the world can that be real? How can that be possible? And we not know that for sure, right? There's no definitive proof that these things are real. We don't have a body. We don't have anything to say 100% outside of the anecdotal evidence and the encounter stories like I focus on my show. We don't know. And yeah, I have those days all the time. Some days I just come home and I'll interview somebody and I just sit back and I'm like, is any of this real? But I keep going because I believe that there's way more to the world than we ever understand or may ever understand.
Have you? And you know what? I've always felt that most guests, and certainly your show or any of these shows, and in real life where I've, talked to witnesses, I don't think I've ever I don't think I've ever ran into somebody I knew that they were lying, because there's no motivation. Why? For what reason? I usually have to talk people into coming on a show or being in Monster Quest, or, that's people don't want to, they have nothing to gain by coming forward. But do you ever have a guest on and all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, they're lying or they're exaggerating, or, you know what I mean? You must have secrets that you have, everybody does, to tell if somebody's maybe exaggerating or lying. But yeah, I'd just love to hear your opinion on all that.
Yeah, it happened to me recently. We try our best to scan and vet the people who come on the show as much as possible. I get some crap in some of the posts on Facebook and whatnot. People listen to the show and they're like, how could you have that guy on the show? He's obviously lying. He wasn't abducted by aliens. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? There's got to be proof both ways, right? So, and my argument to that is always this, I'm not a detective. I don't have time to travel to a place where somebody had an experience in 1975 to vet their story. So I do my very best talking to them beforehand. Danny, my producer, does the same thing. We go back and forth. We don't have as much time, honestly, as I used to have in the show to do that, because I am doing 3 shows. So we do the best we can, but they slip through the cracks. And that happened to me recently. I got on the phone with a guy and we were supposed to do a Zoom interview, and his Zoom wouldn't work and it just didn't work out. So I ended up calling him, and about, I don't know, 20 seconds in, I could tell that he was probably not mentally stable. So, I think those are more, I've had those a couple of times where people have clearly got some mental health issues on board. So I clearly never put those interviews out because, I listened to a story and I continued to talk to him, and I gave him 30 minutes of my time and said, hey, I appreciate you coming on and talking to me and telling me your stories. And that was sort of the end of it.
Yeah, no, I'll air this. I'll air this soon. And then you hit the delete button, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you're dealing with, because you've started these new podcasts. You've got them on. Do you want to tell us about your other 2 podcasts?
Sure. You mentioned the Paranormal Odyssey podcast, and it was sort of born out of the Sasquatch Odyssey podcast because I would talk to people, and you and I have talked about this before, Doug. You're talking to somebody and they had a Bigfoot encounter, and then, well, have you had any other strange experiences? Yeah. Lights, saw a UFO. Oh, I was abducted by aliens, those kind of things. Yeah. So, and sometimes the Bigfoot folks can be purist, and I get that. They tune in for the Bigfoot podcast and they want to hear Bigfoot encounters. So I started the Paranormal Odyssey specifically to give those people a platform, because I had an experience where I saw a UFO when I was like 16. So I believe that those kind of things exist as well. And I think those people's stories are just as important, if not more important in some cases, than some of the Bigfoot encounters. So I started the Paranormal Odyssey and give people a place to come and talk about, hey, I had an alien encounter. I saw a dog man. I had this ghost experience. I've had people on that have had fascinating stories about orbs. And I just interviewed a lady a couple of days ago. It'll probably be out on Sunday. She has premonitory dreams. I mean, she's had, I think it was at least 3 or 4 dreams, 3 of which were about major air events where aircraft crashed. One of them was 9/11 that she had a dream about before it happened. So I find that stuff interesting, and that's the kind of stuff you find on Paranormal Odyssey. And then, of course, I was a cop for 16 years, so I've always been interested in true crime. So I recently started a true crime podcast. I'm about 7 episodes into True Crime Odyssey. So.
And nobody ever lied to you while you were a police officer, no doubt, ever.
Oh, no.
Sir, have you been drinking? No.
Absolutely not. How many drinks have you had? Just one.
Just one. Always just one. Yeah, I can only imagine. When you, I used to do ride-alongs. I'm sure you've had people ride with you. Maybe you haven't. Maybe they don't allow that in Atlanta. But up here, I used to be a PI. And so I would do ride-alongs and just, we'd just talk about law enforcement. And of course, I always went on a boring night. Every time I do ride-alongs, nothing would ever happen.
I had a good friend of mine actually who worked for me. My first 7 years, about 7 years in law enforcement. I was an administrator at a youth detention facility. I started there as a juvenile corrections officer. And I worked my way up. I was eventually director of operations there for 7 years. And I had a lieutenant that worked for me there. And we've remained friends over the years. And he wanted to come do a ride along with me in Atlanta. And Scott picked his night. He came, he showed up. We gave him his little Kevlar vest. And he got in my old Crown Vic with me. First call out of the gate was Georgia State Patrol's chasing a stolen vehicle on the highway at 100 miles an hour. Lights and sirens, there we go. We're floating down I-85 at 120 in my Crown Vic, and I look over and Scott's eyes are like saucers. And he's holding on to his seat. And I'm like, you okay, man? He's like, yeah, I'm good. And that just started that night. It was definitely not a non-eventful night. We had tons of calls. It was like an overturned vehicle. We had shots fired. It was an eventful night. So he got his money's worth on his ride along.
Yeah. Yeah, well, out in the suburbs, I just never got lucky. There was always, I think we maybe one traffic stop here or there, but I must have done 100 ride-alongs and never had one thing happen. So it's one of those things. So you've probably heard more stories than anybody. God knows. I can only imagine. How many podcast episodes have you done now?
Sasquatch Odyssey, I think we're on 120, and Paranormal Odyssey about 36 or 37. They all start to run together after a while.
But is there one sighting that just oh my God, you got to listen to this episode because it was so amazing? Is there one that just stands out? One story?
Yeah, and it's actually somebody It's Jeff from British Columbia. He is the only person that I've interviewed that has ever had a really aggressive encounter with a Sasquatch where he was actually hit.
Oh, Jeff Harding.
Yeah, Jeff Harding.
Yes.
His story just resonated with me. And frankly,
it happened in Manitoba.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, Manitoba.
Okay.
If Jeff, you're listening, it's not me. I've had comments, and that was one of those shows that I actually got some comments online and said, how can you believe this guy's story? He's full of crap. And I'm like, did you listen to my show, or did you listen to a different show and get me confused with somebody? Because his story was one of the most compelling stories that I frankly ever heard. And like I said, it's for me, I know other people have probably had those encounters and shared those encounters, but that's the first time I'd ever heard of a Sasquatch hitting somebody or throwing something at somebody other than pebbles or rocks or sticks or something like that actually made contact. So that one has really stuck out with me.
Yeah, that's the one where he bends down, I think, looks up, and he sees this thing standing over him, and then shoved like the root ball of a tree, a small tree right into his chest. Yeah. What the most amazing thing, Brian, I loved about this story was when later on he ends up talking to the guides and they show him a boat where the guide's boat was attacked and the boat had big dents in it. And I guess it was really squished and was banged up really bad. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, everything about that story from beginning to end to me really stuck out. And, like I said, 100, and I say it often, a lot of the stories that I hear don't make it onto the show. So I've done even more interviews with folks that have had other encounters, but that one was definitely one of the most compelling for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, that was the non-counter, Brian. You're not getting off that easy. What's your second best? It was a non-counter because I think I recommended that one to you.
You actually did. I think you did send it my way.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's so hard to say.
Is there one that just?
There was one from, and I can't remember his name. I apologize if you're listening, but he had an encounter where a dog was attacked. A couple of dogs actually, and it was in Louisiana. And just some really aggressive vocalizations and really aggressive encounters with these things. And one of his dogs ended up getting stomped to death, and this thing threw it out of the woods at him. And that always stuck out to me and resonated with me because I've heard so many stories about these things being aggressive towards dogs. And that was I'm a dog lover. I love my dogs, and it was hard to listen to, obviously, that this thing had killed a dog, but at the same time, it just sort of compounded what I'd been hearing from other people around the country in different places. And that was a really compelling episode too. I couldn't tell you what number it was, but it's in the back catalog. If you guys want to go find it, it's I can't remember his name, but he's from Louisiana. But really encountered some really aggressive stuff in the woods, and obviously lost a dog in the process.
That's crazy. Probably one of my favorite stories, and I always think about it because it took me 4 years to drag it out of this guy. And the guy was a law enforcement officer, but he was always willing to help me. Every time I had a little project with Bigfoot, he was always willing to help me. He was willing to do tracking, willing to, line me up with other people, blah, 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 blah. But he would never, as I kept saying, I'm not going to give his name, but I kept saying, you must have had an encounter. Why don't you tell me your encounter? And he was like, I didn't have any encounter, blah, 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 blah. So one day he finally told me his story, and I'll relay this story. And that when he was young, he was poaching deer. He was deer hunting, but he was poaching, which is one reason he didn't want to tell me the story. He's out in the woods, pitch black, before the sun comes up. He's armed. He's walking through the woods, walking to maybe a deer stand. And he said he got shoved so hard. He got shoved like down to the ground just instantly, by something very, very powerful. That's it. That's the story. But could you imagine walking in the woods, Brian? And all of a sudden something huge shoves you straight down to the ground with extreme force?
I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine what that would be like.
That's nuts. But it just, to take that long to tell me, years, and then finally to tell me, and it's actually a pretty anticlimactic story, but it also shows kind of an odd aggression, almost passive aggressive. I'm going to shove you down in the dark, and I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm really going to show you who's boss here. Yeah, and that made, although he didn't see anything or hear anything, that made him a believer.
And I think that goes to show, a lot of people, and I try to say this as often as I can, because I think people, obviously my show's for entertainment. People are entertained by it. They tune in every week to hear the stories, and everybody has their own reason for why they listen, I'm sure. But it's important to remember that these are people telling these stories. And I try to keep the focus on that because we lose sight of that sometimes. It's just entertaining, it happened, it is what it is. But there's a lot of things that go on. There's a lot of PTSD involved in some cases in these stories. And it does often take a lot of time to get these people to trust you enough, first and foremost, and then feel comfortable enough to tell their story, because they don't want people to think they're crazy, number one.
Yeah.
And some people just, I've asked people before, hey, will you share your story? Will you share your evidence? And they're like, no, I don't need to. I know it's real. I know what I saw. I know what I've got as far as evidence, and I don't need to give it to anybody or share it with anybody because I'm not trying to prove anything. And I get that. I'm sort of the same way myself, but it's tough. And when you hear these people come on a show like mine or any of the other shows where you share their encounters, it's difficult for them. And like you said in the beginning, Doug, there's no win for them. There's no reason for them to come out and tell their story because it's not going to be celebrated. I mean, somebody might listen to it and, hey, love the show, great encounter, can't wait for next week. And that's going to be about it. There's nothing for them to gain by telling their stories.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't know about you, but I've come to an unscientific conclusion that 1% of people tell their stories, 1 out of 100. I don't know what your conclusion is. But
yeah, I think that's about right. I think,
it's not many.
And then that even just sort of compounds my thought process, and it keeps me up at night because I'm thinking, again, here we are, it's 2022. We're no closer, in my opinion, necessarily to proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that these things are real, but so many people are having these encounters. And like you said, if it's 1% of the actual encounters, I mean, it's mind-boggling to even consider how many people are having these encounters. And then we have no more evidence than we do. And I think we do have a ton of evidence, don't get me wrong, but it's just one of those things. And everybody gives me crap. I had some folks commenting the other night. It was on, I think it was Todd Standing's Facebook group. And I was talking in the interview I had with Todd, and I'm talking about proving this, wanting it to be proven and me looking for those answers. And it was like, why do you need it to be proven? Well, for nothing else, for me, I want to know. I want to know what they are.
Personally.
It's a species, right. It's a personal thing because I believe these things are way more than dumb apes in the woods. And I think I want to know more about them. And first and foremost, you got to prove it. And then you got to do the research and figure out what they are and how they live. And do they have a language? Do they have a culture? All those things. So
one of the reasons I really, that drove me to even do TV was just to get personal answers, almost on a selfish level. You just want to know. And I think that's, shows in like a show like Monster Quest or like your podcast, because you've had an encounter. So you really just want to know what the heck. You're looking for answers. You're on a mission. I mean, that makes a big difference.
Yeah. And like I said, I have no idea what I experienced when I was 12. I still to this day don't know. We've had experiences here on the property in North Carolina that I can't explain, vocalizations. I had David Ellis and Julie Wrench on my show, and we played a lot of Julie's evidence that she's collected not too far from me here in North Carolina. Very similar sounds. Same thing with the Ohio howl. Very similar to the Ohio howl, but we're hearing it in North Carolina. It's being documented here. So I want to know what's doing that.
Well, why don't you, have you ever tried doing a wood knock on your property, Brian?
I may have once or twice.
Are you not in? Come on, have you or have you not?
I have. I've never gotten a response, but I have done.
Yeah, but a response doesn't have to come back as a wood knock.
This is true.
I mean, trust me. I mean, we've had, we did some wood knocking once at a cabin. No, it wasn't Snellgrove. It was another cabin up near the Boundary Waters, right on the border. And my son Blaine can attest because it was there. We were up there with a number of people, and the cabin got attacked. That one too, every night, literally every night after we did, some wood knocks, including screams, throwing rocks at the cabin. It's just amazing. And this cabin was one of these off the grid cabins that you could rent off, what are those, Vibo rentals? Hello?
Hello.
There you are. There
I'm
you are. I lost you there for a second.
It's because I muted myself. Trust me, folks, I am a professional. Yeah, we've had tons of experiences here that I can't explain. And, I've talked about this on my show too. We were filming a television show last year, and
Can you talk about it? Will you interrupt? What television show?
yeah, we'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
So they were filming some pickups on the property, and we were walking around, 300 yards or so from my house in the woods, and we walk across and we come across this area of the property that we literally hike our dogs, hike with our dogs around the property. And I'd seen the area before. It's a lot of bent over trees, and it looks really interesting. And, I thought, that kind of looks like a tree structure. These trees are bent around, and it just doesn't look natural to me. And I've even walked over closer and took a look, and then, the dog barks or runs, and I took off. But that particular day, we were walking around the property, and the cameraman looks, and he's like, "What is that over there?" Like, he noticed it. And I said, "Oh, I've seen that area before." And so he's like, "Well, why don't you go over there? I'm going to film some B-roll of you just walking through the woods or whatever." And I walk over to this area, and I walk into it. And the more I looked, the more amazed I was, because it really looks like, 12, 14, 16 of these large hardwood trees are like bent over and woven in. And I would get closer, and it was even, one was like tucked under another and bent behind another. And I'm like, there's no way.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
Okay. Is there any kind of water source, a pond, a creek, a river, a lake within 600 yards of that tree structure?
Yes. We do have a creek. We have 2 creeks on the property.
Okay. Well, here's why I mention it. I have never found a stick structure ever that's over 600 yards away from a water source, ever. And we have found hundreds and hundreds from Mankato all the way to northern Minnesota. In fact, I can look at a map in many cases and pick out a place where I know there will be a stick structure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I still, he was filming me, and I'm like, okay, we're not going to say, I'm not going to say definitively I'll say what I think this is, but I'm not going to definitively say. I'm not one of those people to say, oh, I found a tree structure on my property. It is a structure of some sort made out of sticks. So I can definitively say that.
And it is 600 yards or less from a water source.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. See, there you go. Bingo again.
We check some boxes. So who knows?
I don't know what it means, but if you find stick structures, check and see how far. And usually here's the most interesting part of it. Most of them are 500 yards almost on the dot from water.
I'm going to have to go walk it off now.
See, doesn't that freak you out? If you walk it off and it's 500 yards to the dot, you'll be going, whoa. So that's kind of, it's information that most people don't know. But it's been consistent for me, and it's unscientific, but it's been very consistent. So I'd love you to walk it off and give me that number, give me that yardage.
Yeah, I have to do that. I'll text you some pictures of it this weekend. I haven't even taken any pictures of it outside of what he filmed. And the show just aired last night on Vice, and I don't know that it's even made it into the show. So, but yeah, it's interesting. And I've talked to so many people in North Carolina. There's Bobby that's been on the show a couple of times near the Uwharrie National Forest, and Bobby has found tons of different stick structures and things like that. And he has sent me plenty of things in the past that are intriguing for sure. But I've always been on the fence about that with the tree knocks and the stick structures. Let me ask you, Doug, what do you think those things mean? Do you think there's some sort of communication? They're clearly not making them they're not structures in that you can climb in and get out of the elements. So what do you think?
Right. Okay. I think there are 3 types. One, we have found some that would shed rain, some rain, not all of it, but some. In other words, if you're going to build a temporary shelter to, let's say you've got a juvenile with you, or it's going to hail, And I can talk about that a little bit more, but one would be a hunting blind, one would be a territorial marker, and one would be a semi-shelter, block a little of the wind, a little bit of the rain, a little bit of the snow. And those are my thoughts. I mean, what else could they be?
Yeah, like I said, some
the
of
big ones would be territorial, the big giant, like the ones you've done. I've seen those too. And the weirdest thing is you need to check those often, because I've actually seen 80 feet tall structures disappear overnight.
Really?
Yep, overnight, gone. Just gone. You're like, and the logs where they were are been carried off. And we're talking 1,000-pound logs.
Yeah. Well, my structure's still there. I haven't been up there in a couple of days to see if it's changed much, but it's been there since we've been on this part of the property.
One thing you could do, if it's the season that they're on your property, is to do a wood knock right at the structure, and then leave a audio recorder there. You might be surprised what you hear. And we're doing a lot of that too, where we're actually leaving audio recorders at these structures, and we're getting wood knocks at 3 and 4 in the morning, screams, all sorts of cool stuff.
I know you've been after me for the last year, basically, to put some audio recorders out on my property, and I've got to do that. I've got to find the time to do that, because I would be very interested. We hear some wild things, like I said, even inside the house, and it blows my mind that other people around us. I mean, we have neighbors a half a mile away. Other people have to be hearing this stuff, so I know we're not the only ones.
Have you had your house slapped, Brian, where it's like boom, you get like, what in the heck was that?
Fortunately not.
Well, what's happened around the house, the homestead?
Just the vocalizations. That's really it. The structure that I just talked about is the only thing as far as evidence. We found some weird looking, what could be footprints while we're hiking, but there is a lot of black bear around here. So I'm pretty much, I always kind of go to that Occam's razor kind of thing. It's probably, we've seen black bear on the property. This is a footprint that resembles a black bear, so it's probably a black bear. But we've seen some other just weird things, disturbances around the leaves, and it just didn't sit right with me. Sometimes you just have that moment where you can't really explain or put your finger on, hey, this is this or that's that, but it's just that feeling that you get that this is not natural, like something out of the ordinary sort of made that. I don't know, it's interesting.
Dead animals, you ever found any, rabbit with its head ripped off? Like Tobe Johnson sent me some photos just in his yard, but it's odd. I mean, when you find 2 dead rabbits with their heads ripped off, I don't know what, I'm not really sure what would do that. That would be the last part that most animals will eat, would be the head.
Yeah, we found never any dead animals like that. We found bones and things like that of what we assumed to be naturally deceased animals, but no, nothing strange like.
But have you found bones like left in a trail that weren't there the week before, or, skulls that have been left on a trail?
No, nothing like that. Okay. But it's interesting you mentioned that. I had Timothy Renner from Strange Familiars podcast on my show last year, and Timothy has this thing where almost everywhere he goes, a skull like that turns up, like in the middle of a trail that he just walked down. It's just really interesting things. And he has no explanation for it, but he collects them now, which I thought was really, really cool, that he's having some sort of experience with something, because it just doesn't make sense. And I don't know if it's Sasquatch or something else. I don't know.
It's funny. David Ellis says, don't knock rocks unless you have an escape route.
I saw that. And David was like, yes, put the recorders out. I will, David, I promise.
Yeah, you need to. They just don't, I don't know why, I have no explanation, but they don't seem to mind audio recorders. They just don't, and I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense, but they'll even seem to pick them up, handle them, scratch them. You get a lot of rock throwing and wood banging and drumming, and God knows, it's nuts sometimes.
Do you think it has something to do with the difference in like the IR on the cameras versus none in the audio recorders?
I can't say, because I haven't conducted all the experiments I want to yet. Don't know.
David's asking me if I have an outbuilding. that had a door open when it should have been closed. No, David, I have not.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard that question asked, and I've asked it too, but you haven't found like big white fingerprints on anything around your home?
No, I have not.
Okay. Do you think that Bigfoot on your property have anything to do with the fact that you're interested in the topic? I've always wondered that.
You know, it's funny you say that. I had my friend Jonathan Odom down in Alabama. He's a hardcore Bigfooter. And I was talking to Jonathan. I called him literally like the night after we had that Ohio howl thing going on outside the house. And that's the first thing Jonathan said to me. He's like, dude, if you're hearing them, because we'd heard them in the distance, you know, probably half a mile away behind us on the ridge. And he's like, if you're hearing them, you're going to eventually see them. And it's probably not going to be on your timetable. They're going to do it when you least expect it. But, I mean, we've been here. Like, we've owned the property a little over 3 years. We've been here full time about 1.5 years now, and nothing, you know, like I said, outside the vocalizations, maybe 4 times in the distance. And then that one time about 50 yards from the house, and the strange footprints and other things that, like I mentioned,
and the structure and I bet you've forgotten more than you remember about that stuff.
Probably so.
You'd be surprised how many things you'll forget.
Or I start to conflate it with other people's encounters that I've heard the night before. I'm like, wait, was that me? Was that
them? Oh my God. I'm looking at the, I'm not used to this chat thing. Okay, guys. So forgive me. I see John Montoya is in here, and everywhere I go, I run into John. Doesn't matter where I am, I run into John. And I always say, imagine that to John. And he always laughs. Anyhow, I'm looking. If anybody's got questions, why don't you put them in caps and we can just like they'll pop out.
I was trying to see the comments. Now I see. I was like in a private chat, and it was just us. So now I can see everybody.
See, I don't even
know from Kentucky.
Yep, I don't even know how to do that. I'm new to this too. This StreamYard.
There's a whole hey, Clint, what's up, man?
Yeah.
I just went over to the comments. There's a private chat there, Doug, and then there's comments over to the right. That's right.
Yeah, I'm looking at them. I'm looking at them late, just like you.
There's Tim Halloran. Hey, man. Had a good time talking to Tim about his new book. Brian Corbin, what's up, man?
Tim's amazing. It's good people. Anyhow, so if you have questions, just put them in caps. Put them in caps. So, what do you think these things are? Have you come to any conclusion, Brian? Anything at all? Or are you just open-minded?
I'm kind of open-minded. I don't really ask that question on my show. I've asked maybe a handful of people out of all the interviews, you know, what do you think these things are? Because I'm genuinely interested in what people have to say. But, you know, I think there's some sort of relic hominoid. I think, you know, I'm sort of in that camp. You know, you and I have had some conversations about some really wild out there possibilities and theories. You know, when you talk to somebody like Ron Moorhead and you start getting into quantum physics and Bigfoot and the possibilities there. But I sort of believe that I've come down on the relic hominoid. I think there's some sort of bipedal ape species. And I don't necessarily think, I don't close my mind to them being, you know, more than that, obviously, but I just don't know. Again, that changes. You know, 5 days out of 7, I may say that, and then the other 2 days, I've got another answer. So,
yeah, I think probably maybe the best attitude, probably in any topic, any mystery, is just to be open-minded. Just don't shut anything out. But for me, I like to pursue the science, the flesh and blood, and I mean, there's so many things that one can do yet. I mean, we're talking, you could have 1,000 men, scientists, working on this for 10 years, and you wouldn't possibly be able to do all of the science, you know, let alone jump to a conclusion that they're this or that. You know, we really don't know.
Yeah, and I've said it on my show before. I tend to stay away. I've talked to people and had conversations with people, and they start telling you they know exactly what these things do and what they eat and where they move and how they do this. And I'm like, how do you know that? Yeah. Unless you've actually witnessed this, or you have one, or, in your backyard that you interact with every day, which I don't really think that's happening. So anybody who has those definitive answers, I don't really know if I trust that so much. So I like to talk to people who have more questions than answers, really, to be frank. So
I see Vincent's asking, do you experience paranormal activity at your home? Have you ever seen a UFO? And for me personally, Brian, I've had that happen, but I don't understand it. And is it coincidence? You'll come home. I mean, even Blaine one time called me after being out in the field. He said there was rocks piled up on top of our toilet in like a triangle. And he's like, do you think that has anything to do with Bigfoot research? I said, I have no idea. I've had people, call me, and I always worry about giving people's names, but a researcher called me and said, well, I come home, I live alone, and I come home and all of my shoes are in the middle of the living room from research. Now that's interesting, but it's all you can do is just throw it in your gray basket.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the different things that people experience. And Carter Bouchard comes to mind. I've had Carter on the show, and he's had some pretty wild stories that people have told him that are included in some of his books. Sasquatch Evidence of an Enigma and two. Carter, there's two. I understand. He would kill me if I didn't mention the second book. But Carter has had a lot of interesting talks with people that have weird things like that happen. Like you said, they'll have encounters or things happen in the woods, and then they come home and things are turned upside down or out of place in their house. And it's just like, what, how does that happen? Like, are the Sasquatch somehow doing that? Is it something else supernatural in conjunction with, and it's just totally a coincidence? It's fascinating to me that people have this kind of experiences.
Is it possible that while we're in the forest, there's a thing called a timber ghost that we bring home? It has nothing to do with Bigfoot. Nothing. It has to do with spirits and so on in the woods, or entities that live in the woods. And why wouldn't it? If I was an entity, right? Hell yeah, I'd live in the woods. I wouldn't definitely not live in a house. I'd be in the forest. If I couldn't feel cold, right? Or whatever, where would you want to be? You'd be in the beauty of the forest. So maybe there's all sorts of entities that live there, nothing to do with Bigfoot, that we track home. Because I've had, I can think back and go, yeah, there was one time I was out researching, I come home, and then all of a sudden I'm hearing running up and down the hallway, and I'm hearing banging on the doors. And I get up, Brian, and I'm thinking my kids are up raising hell at 2 a.m. And I go and check on my daughter, and she's sound asleep. I go check on the other daughter, and she's sitting up crying because she said there was something in my room. And she heard the banging and the running too. It woke her up. But did that have something to do with Bigfoot? I don't know. I have no idea. Never will. But certainly a weird ghosty type experience.
Yeah, that's why I love the subject, man. It's a never-ending story, and I love to hear people's encounters and their experiences because everything's different, It's never too wild for me. I like the wild stories.
So Vincent said elementals, and I've heard that name. I don't really know what an elemental is, but I would imagine it's some kind of, energy that, or not energy, some kind of a being that lives in the forest. Because I've heard that over and over. In fact, there was somebody told me they'd hired a psychic because they were having so much Bigfoot activity on their property, and the psychic gets her and said, "Oh my God, there's elementals living all around the forest here." Have you heard that before? That term?
I have. I actually, one of the shows that I was on, the host was he was a demonologist. That was sort of his thing, and he talked about elementals. And I'm with you. I'm not extremely familiar with them, so he schooled me a little bit. But he was of the impression, at least for him, that they were sort of malevolent or dangerous. So I don't know. Found it interesting.
Well, anybody who takes dirty shoes and throws them in the middle of your living room is dangerous.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's like, God, but who makes stories up like that? Nobody. You can't. How do you make a story up like that? You know, and you're trying to reach out to somebody to find out if you're crazy, you know, and they were asking me, has anybody else experienced this kind of stuff? And I'm like, yeah. And I told them stories my son has told me, you know, and I've had a few. But it could be coincidence. It could be, you know, something we dragged from the woods, or it could just be some other explanation. God knows.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like one of the stories that Carter told me on the show was, well, I don't know if he told me on the show or after it was over. I don't remember, honestly, but if it made it into the episode. But he was talking about one of these people he's been working with for a long time to get their story out of them. And I don't want to butcher the story, but I think the gist of it, paraphrased, was this person was having an experience with a Bigfoot that somehow managed to push its arm through the wall and touch him in the forehead and knock him out. And then he woke up and had this really weird experience. And I don't recall all the story, but I just remember hearing that part of the story alone. And I'm like, how in the hell did that happen? Like, how do you explain something being able to stick its arm through the wall and touch you on the head and knock you out? Like, that doesn't even make sense to me, especially in relation to it being a Sasquatch, or possibly what this person thought was a Sasquatch.
Well, one question for you, and you can answer this any way you want, Brian. You can even get mad at me for asking it. But if you had something really that weird happen to you, would you even tell anybody? Would you tell anybody? I bet you wouldn't. No,
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Especially doing what I do now. And I have those times when I have experiences that I don't talk about. You know, we just recently had that this past weekend. We were driving up from our place here in Lenoir to Hickory, North Carolina. About 45 minutes. We were just going up for some shopping and stuff. And I was riding in the truck, so I didn't have to drive. And I was looking out. I'm always looking up. I'm always looking out, looking for things, you know. And beautiful blue sky. And then there was a bunch of clouds on the other side. I see this really weird, large, metallic, sort of cigar-shaped object flying with no wings. And I'm doing like a double, triple, quadruple take, and I'm like, that's really weird. What's weird? I'm like, this UFO that I'm looking at. It is an unidentified flying object. And I'm not saying there was little green men or gray men operating this thing, and then it flies into the clouds and disappears. But it was a really weird experience. And I'm like, you know, do I share that? Do I talk about that on the show? Because I am, you know, I do have this encounter show, and then I start telling my own encounters, and people are like, this guy's full of crap, you know. But you battle with that, even on that small a scale. So yeah, if something that crazy happened to me, nobody's going to know about it.
Yeah, but the point is, you're into this topic and you're public with, you know, talking to people. I mean, you're a media figure. And if even you won't reach out to someone to tell them that story, doesn't that prove to you that, you know, we're dealing with, I bet you in all this other weird stuff, it's probably 0.1% talk about it. And
I agree.
I think it's 1%.
Yeah, I agree. You would probably be the only person I would tell that story, because I know you wouldn't think I was crazy.
No, I don't. Wouldn't it be cool if we could just give an honesty pill for one day? Say, everybody that's had a Sasquatch sighting in this country, we want you to all to, you know, whatever, do something so we know who you are. It would be interesting as hell if you could, you know, inject that honesty for just a moment and find out how many sightings or how many people have just had a really major paranormal experience. I'll bet you almost every man, woman, and child has.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, I've interviewed so many people that have had so many encounters and experiences that I know other people. Well, that's part of the reason that I think a lot of people listen to the shows and they resonate so much, because they've had experiences of their own and they don't share them. You know, and the people that have the opportunity to come on a show like this one or mine or any other show that deals with that and share that and sort of air that for everybody to listen to, I think it's a powerful thing. Yeah. You know, I think it gives people, you know, the comfort of knowing that other people have the same experiences that they have or have had in the past. So, you know, and that's one of the reasons that I continue to do the shows, because I want to give people that space to be able to come on and talk about it safely and not feel like they're crazy. And then, other people might hear that and come forward and share their stories and feel better about themselves, knowing that there are other people out there that are not by themselves.
Yeah. One thing I always like to talk about when I do it, like if I do a public talk, I like to start out by complimenting the audience for having the curiosity to be in the audience. For instance, the audience here in the chat room, these people the people in the chat room, so I'm going to compliment all of you. You all have a much higher IQ than the average person. It's why you're here. You're here because you want to learn something. You're hungry for knowledge. And obviously you are, Brian. I mean, you're hyper aware because you're looking. You just don't take everything for granted. Like, I don't know if I really don't know the percentage of the population, but I would imagine it's only kind of a small percentage of the population, like maybe 10%, that's more hyper aware, more hyper curious about the world. Do you kind of agree with? Do you know what I mean by that? Super curious about everything.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the same could be said about the audience for the show, the audience for my show,
Yeah, exactly.
any type of show that deals with those kind of things, because you're seeking those answers and you're talking with and listening to like-minded people. And I agree with you. Sadly, it's probably, the percentage is maybe even lower than that, because I think everything has just been so dumbed down in this day and age that people don't really seek knowledge the way they used to, because everybody thinks they know everything. You know, I think a lot of people miss out on a lot of things because they're looking at their phone or they're watching television or whatever the case may be. And everybody needs their release and their moments for themselves. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I mean, a podcast is sort of that. It's a sort of an escape for everybody. But at the same time,
no, I don't agree with that. I don't agree. I don't think anybody just listens to your podcast because they want to escape. I think they listen to your podcast because they want to learn. They're curious. They want to learn. And like Texas Jack brought up a point that somebody who has no interest in the world and doesn't want to learn, they're going to see a Bigfoot and they're just going to blow it off. They're just going to put it away. They're not going to talk about it. It's not going to spur any curiosity in their world because their mind is shut. They're probably somebody who works maybe an 8-hour day, comes home, and maybe they just, put on the news and go to bed. That's it. They're just they're not into the world. They don't want to learn. And certainly there are people like that, lots of them. And it's sad because, that's what I think we're here for, Brian. I think we're here to learn. I mean, what else could we be here for?
I agree. And one of the things that I did when I started my show, one of the first things I did was try to seek out groups on Facebook that were more critical thinking leaning. And I joined those groups and had some conversations, a lot of tough conversations in a lot of cases. I joined the Coalition for Critical Thinking and Bigfoot Research, Stephen Struffert's group. And I've had Stephen on the show, the crotchety skeptic. But I love Steve because he comes from this angle of critical thinking. And
there's nothing wrong with critical thinking, but there is something wrong with critical shutout, where somebody sees a UFO right there and they go, that doesn't exist. Can't exist, doesn't exist. And they never go on to try to learn anything. I don't have any, real respect for those kind of people. If they're a true skeptic, but they're a learning skeptic that wants to learn, they want to ask you questions. I've met skeptics that don't sit there and milk my brain forever on the topic, but I have a ton of respect for them. Yeah, they're critical thinking, but they want to learn too. Because just because you're a skeptic doesn't mean you know everything about the topic.
Right. And there's a very fine line for crossing over from being skeptical, which I am in my own
I am
right.
too. Everything I see, I'm always skeptical of it.
But once you get cynical, we've crossed the line and you start making fun of people, and it just becomes a snowball effect from there. And I've met a lot of cynical people in this, unfortunately, but a lot of skeptical people that think critically, and I learn from those people. We have some great conversations. It challenges me to learn more, and some of the things I say on the show, people say, well, have you researched that? Well, I go back and research, and I change my opinion a lot of times because I educate myself. I read and I study, and then I come back and say, I've thought about this, and I think this may be a possibility.
Right. Yeah. And just to clarify what I had said about critical thinking or skeptics, if a skeptic doesn't know the facts and they're poo-pooing a topic, shame on them. But if they're really in the know and they really do know the facts, both sides, not just one, I mean, they're really in the know, and they want to come to the conclusion that something's not real or whatever, but they're still in a learning mode. Perfect. Total respect. Total.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yep. I have no problem. But there are some people out there, trust me, that it's just, they don't bother me with the facts. My mind is made up.
Yeah, I don't get very far in conversations with folks like that. I don't really have a place for it.
Yeah.
I want to learn. I want to continue the conversation. And if you've got new ideas that challenge what I believe, let's talk about it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's the thing. I just, it's sometimes there's obviously you had mentioned, like trolls that, they'll just make disparaging comments, but they don't really know any facts. Tim had mentioned in something in the comments about my opinion on the Minnesota Iceman. And yes, the Minnesota Iceman, it was a hoax because I knew Frank Hansen. I met him. I saw the thing back in the early 70s. I saw the thing in the ice. I noticed the pores in the forehead, that they were oversized pores. Even then I knew, even as a young kid, I could see the pores, these huge pores with a hair sticking out of them. And then the guy would take pig entrails and pig eye, and he'd put all this junk over the ice, and then he would freeze, they do that layer and then freeze it. And it's a cool story, but the Minnesota Iceman is not real. It's just not based on fact, firsthand knowledge, not secondhand. So anyhow, there you go.
There you go, Tim. You heard it here first.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm definitely a skeptic. Where it needs to be, where you need to be, prove like a piece of something that's not real or piece of evidence that's not real. I'm looking for the truth, as you are, and I'm just, do what it takes to get to that. And sometimes we find the truth, and it's not necessarily good for the I don't know, what do you call it? The science of Bigfoot. It goes against them existing. But the truth is what it is. The truth is the truth.
Yeah, I think that happens in every story that I hear. There's a little bit of truth in everything I think that people say. And of course, people embellish their stories. I believe that wholeheartedly. But for the most part, I think 99% of the people who come on to share their story are relaying what they believe really happened to them. And we learn every little bit of that, even when people fake evidence. I've talked about that on the show before. When people are hoaxing evidence and faking things, we learn from that just as much as we do people collecting real, authentic things out in the field. You learn from everything that you do.
So Brian's at a party, right? You're at a party, somebody's birthday party. You're with a bunch of strangers. Do you ever bring up the Bigfoot topic? Or do you just, what do you do for a living? Do you just shut up, or what do you do?
No, I do. I'm usually wearing one of my t-shirts or something out in public, when I'm not at home or whatnot. And people ask the question, and I'm quick to tell them, yeah, I believe in Bigfoot. And then of course that starts the conversations. Now, the part of the country I'm in, I'm in the Southeast in North Carolina, and just 30 minutes away from here is Morganton, North Carolina. And they've got a ton of, Bigfoot related things. You see Bigfoot signs everywhere. And there's a local brewery who has a couple of drinks named out, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, something, whatever. So it's sort of in the zeitgeist in the area that I'm in.
So you don't mind talking about it publicly. You just, whatever, you're totally into it. Did we lose Brian, Alex? There we are. What happened to Brian? Get him back on. Nope, you got your mic muted, Alex.
Oh, here we go. He's back.
Oh, there he is.
Well, that was interesting.
Yep, no, we have 1/3 of all of our faces.
What happened there?
I have no idea. I was
Internet.
talking and my screen just went blank, and I
Yeah,
was
it's
like,
the internet.
"Oh, that's not
Yeah.
good."
Yeah, the Russians are hacking us. That's what's
They heard
happening.
us talking about Bigfoot.
I absolutely love the topic, and I swear to God, I probably drive people crazy. I'm thinking about a guy. I went to one of these sporting goods stores, and I bought a side by side, an all-terrain vehicle. And of course, by the end of the thing, man, we're talking Bigfoot, me and the sales guy. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, I did it again.
Yeah, I don't have any scruples about talking about it in public. I don't have any problem with it. I was a little hesitant. In law enforcement, you don't go to work and talk about that all the time. So I sort of suppressed that for all those years. And then once I left that in 2016, I was like, screw it. I don't care. I believe what I believe, and I'm going to do what I do. And most people, you'll be surprised. I went to my barber. We went downtown to one of the local breweries this past summer, and they had a cornhole tournament. So we entered in this cornhole tournament, and like, what do you want your team name to be? And I was like, Sasquatch Odyssey. Like, well, that's interesting. And then, of course, people start asking.
It's blatant advertising.
And then people start asking you questions, and I'm like, yeah, I do a Bigfoot Encounters podcast. And so many people that were at that I was probably 50 people participating in there. And I think every single one of them now listen to the podcast, because I'll go downtown. My barber listens to the show, and he's like, man, that show, like show 89 was crazy. And I'm like, well, yeah, you probably remember more about it than I do, unfortunately. But yeah, it's just one of those topics, and it's more about a personal thing. Like, they know me, they put a face to the podcast, and it's interesting. It's something for them to talk about,
You know what I love to do is, like, if I meet somebody from a township where I know there's been sightings and I have them all memorized, I'll tell them about them just to freak the guy out. There was literally like 8 blocks from the dealership I was at, there was a man that was attacked back because it's all wooded and all forested. He was on a bike ride and he was attacked back there. And I'm telling the guy, and you can just see his eyes just get big, right? And people they don't get it. And then I tell them, it's like, hey, it's an edge, it's forest, it's wild turkeys back there. Every kind of animal you can think of lives back there. Tons of deer. Why wouldn't they be there? I don't think they're living there, but they're punching in. And the guy's his eyes got bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's interesting.
That's a good question. You don't think they live there? I've always been curious about the migration, because I've talked to plenty of people that say, there's Sasquatch in this area, and then
it's going to the grocery store.
Yeah, I kind of believe that too. Is that
all
sort
the groceries? It's just about the groceries, Brian. They punch in. Okay, my personal belief is 90% of the fish are by edges in a lake, right? The structure in a lake, a rock pile in the middle of the lake, that'll hold all the fish. 10% of the lake will hold 90% of the fish. It's the same thing in the wild. Animals gravitate towards edges. In the suburbs, in areas like your property, it's an edge. I bet you've got a fence, maybe. You've got a garden growing. The neighbor's got a apple orchard. It's edges. They punch in for the groceries, and then they're out of there. And they go to wherever they feel safe. But then the grocery changes. The grocery list changes as the seasons progress. All of a sudden, all the vegetation becomes cellulose. There's no more vitamins in it. Now they need to go to meat. Where's the most meat? They'll go to that place or that area. So I don't think they're really migrating for the warmth. I think they're migrating for the groceries.
That's a pretty good theory.
Yeah. And some probably have to, I would imagine, okay, like we were talking about white-tailed deer, and some white-tailed deer love fruit. Some white-tailed deer hate fruit. A lot of people think, oh, they all eat the same thing. Nope, they don't. They're all different. They all have their own different taste buds, just like we do, you know? And they go to where that favorite food is, you know, that certain time of year. Oh, I know if I go there in, you know, to Brian's place in January, there's going to be this crop that's going to be ready. And they go there, and then when that's gone, they're out of there. So.
Very interesting theory.
Yeah.
Slackmate asked what region. I'm in Lenore, North Carolina.
Yeah. Interesting. And somebody asked Vincent asked if they're interdimensional. Don't know. We don't know. We don't know because they're probably interdimensional. That's why we don't know.
Ask Ron Moorhead. He'll tell you.
Yeah, ask Ron. Yeah, he'll give you an answer. Yeah, and it is interesting when people do come. But I think even Ron's open-minded. He doesn't for sure. He just thinks, oh, this is really cool. It does fit into the mold of what we experienced. And he gravitates. But even Ron, I spent, you know, last summer, I picked Ron up at the airport and got to spend just one-on-one time for a couple hours. And no, he's open-minded. He doesn't know. And he tells you he doesn't know.
Yeah, the key to what you said was he bases that off of his experience.
Yeah, right.
You talk to Ron or hear him tell a story and talk about his experiences. There's some pretty out there things that happen. So
yeah, there is. And I don't even know all of them, actually. I'm going to have to find, I'm going to hear bits and pieces. But yeah, I guess they saw a lot of weird stuff and experienced some pretty amazing things.
Yeah, somebody was telling me, I was talking today, somebody was emailing me back and forth and saying that Ron was in North Carolina. I was like, I'm not so sure that he's moved. That was an interesting tidbit for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wizard asks, he goes, how do we know we're not interdimensional? Maybe. Yeah, that's true. We might be the ones that pop in and out of their dimension.
I call that solving an enigma with another enigma.
Well, sometimes you need to combine 10 of them, you know. And again, it makes my eyes just go. So I'm just still sticking with hair, poop, blood, and all that stuff, you know, and pictures and photos and videos and audio recordings. It's all I can do. Eh?
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I can't do anymore. So, so what's your elevator pitch, Brian? If you meet somebody totally strange, right? You know, maybe it's you know, your neighbor or whatever, and you're having a beer. What's your elevator pitch that they're real? I want to hear it right out of your mouth, because I guarantee you've done it a million times.
Well, it would probably be twofold, right? I think the first thing I would point to is the overwhelming amount of anecdotal evidence. All the stories, all the experiences from people that are very credible. And there's credible people in every field, but let's talk about doctors, lawyers. Well, I don't know how credible lawyers are. Judges, you know, I mean, law enforcement, first responders, you name it, it runs the gamut, right? The guy who fills up your car down at the local gas station, whatever the case may be. Literally hundreds. My show, there are shows out there who have 800 episodes of these encounters. So if all those people tell their story, and in order for this not to be real, these things aren't real, everybody has to be lying. Either they've made it up, it's a misidentification, you know, they've got some mental health issues on board, whatever the case may be, right? So you take that. And so I guess it's that if one is true theory, then they all have got to be true. So, but if it is one person had an experience that was real, then they exist, right? So that would be the first thing. And then it's the evidence. I mean, the video evidence, the Patterson-Gimlin film, for example, let's go there. Some of the best, in my opinion, video evidence of a Sasquatch is the Patterson-Gimlin film. Now, there's been plenty of other characters out there that have claimed to capture them on, you know, video in the past, pictures, whatever the case may be. You can go down that rabbit hole. Todd Standing comes to mind. And I've said it to Todd. I said it to him 2 days ago. You're either the greatest hoaxer of all time, or you have captured the best evidence that these things exist I have ever seen. And I'm still on the fence. I don't know. But just those things, just the anecdotal evidence and the stories that people tell over and over and over again, as far back in history as we have it recorded, basically, these things have been cited and experiences have been had. So, if that's the case, there's got to be something to this. They got to be real. That was a really long elevator speech, wasn't it?
Yeah. You kind of moved it right out of the elevator pitch to, well, unless maybe you were in the Empire State Building, that would have worked.
That's where we were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and what I tell people is I just go, well, there's literally hundreds of sightings per day. It's fueled every day. So I research the topic. I don't have any answers. But if we just ignore it, it ain't going away. Let's put it that way. So, it's like people are seeing something. That's for damn sure. And there's, the history, Brian. That alone amazes you. Do you do any historical research on Bigfoot?
Not as much as I used to do before I started doing the 3 shows, but I certainly do. I just did an episode last week before last, where I sort of highlighted the Albert Ostman story. And I read that story for everybody and sort of gave the backstory on that, because that's one of those that you either believe or you don't.
There's one thing in that story that just really gets me. And that is when he talks about the goose walk. That they walked like geese. And he observed, he was with these creatures, for 3 days or 2 days or some damn thing before he escaped. But he does mention, I'm not sure everybody knows that, but he observed them walking. He called it the goose walk. And that's exactly what I discovered in the Patterson film. That was one of my first descriptions before I knew Ostman said it. That their feet go in and out like that. And they discovered recently that early man walked that way. And so when you fit all those things together, this is recent. It was after I came to my conclusion on I called it the mountain gait, where their knees go in and out, their hips rotate and so on. So it's not just compliant gait. It's more complicated than that. And I remember the look. I was actually with Jeff when he told me. He said, "Hey, a paper just came out that described this walk with early man." And so, it kind of lends credence to, of course, the things I had noticed and the things Ostman described. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and my point to that story when I put it on the air was, look, at the end of the day, it's either true or not, but it doesn't really matter, because it's a fantastic story. And it goes back to what you mentioned earlier, Doug. He had nothing to gain at any point by coming out and telling the story.
No.
Nothing at all.
Not back in those days.
No, nothing but ridicule. Some of the same things that Gimlin and Patterson experienced after they brought out the Patterson Gimlin film. It is what it is.
Have you ever heard the original recording with I think John Green did?
I have not.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Then there was even an earlier one that I aired it. If you can find the Monster Quest episode, I'm bad about this. I don't even know the one, but I've got the original recording of Albert telling that story in that Monster Quest. And I'll bet you, let me think. God, I can't think of it. It's actually, I really like the episode. I can't think of it. It's one on Bigfoot. It's a Monster Quest. People can search for it, but it's really cool to hear his voice telling that story.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the same one. I did find it was I think it was 1971, but it wasn't John Green. It was somebody else that had interviewed him, and he told a story. But yeah, it's a fascinating story. And the duck walk, like you said, he was talking about, I think it was in particular, he was focusing in on what I heard him talking about was the old lady, as he called her, and the way she walked and her hips and the way she was built. It was spot on for what we would, see in the Patterson Gimlin film years later.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then people keep bringing up the Daniel Boone story, or was it the Davy Crockett story? I can't even remember. See, I'm bad about that.
I think Daniel Boone said he shot one in Kentucky.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Do you know that story?
I don't. I just know that he said that.
Oh, so you're in the same boat I am. Too much crap floating around in your head. I've got to research that because I'm not sure if that's true or not yet. I mean, keep hearing about it, but I'm not really sure it's true.
But I do love the history. I said it after I did the Albert Osmond story. I wanted to maybe do something, and do like a series over the course of, a few months or whatever, and just highlight some of the stories that I found compelling from the history, because we learn from history, right? You go back and look and see what people experienced and what you can compare those same things. That's one of the things I love about Timothy Renner on Strange Familiars. Timothy does that hardcore deep dive research, and I love to hear him tell those historical sightings, because he'll tell you a story that was documented in 1918 or whatever, and it sounds like one that happened in 2010, or last year or yesterday. So I think that it's interesting that, of course, now people have that ability. You can look back in history, but who goes back and studies what Albert Osmond said about a Bigfoot in an interview in 71 and then tries to, I'm going to incorporate that when I tell my story? Nobody does that. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt there'll be new things that we're going to find, historical things that will match up to future things, concerning Bigfoot mystery. It's no doubt. I mean, all that history hasn't been uncovered. I was like shocked when Champlain, the guy that discovered Lake Champlain, had sightings, talked about these, big hairy people, big giant people. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's the same thing geographically, right? I talk about it on the show often. People are seeing and hearing the same thing in, the Pacific Northwest that we are experiencing in Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. It fascinates me that can be happening, and people aren't really picking up on the correlations often, and it's like, well, look, that happened 10 years ago, and this guy saw this roadside crossing, and it walked exactly like the roadside crossing I just found last week in British Columbia, or whatever the case may be.
So what's your prediction of how this is going to end, the mystery? It's going to end at some point, but it has to.
Yeah, I agree.
I think at some point technology will even solve ghost problem.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, I've said it so many times, it's going to take a body, possibly two before science.
No, that's not what I asked you, Brian. I said, how's it going to end? How is the body going to be gotten? Or how, how does it end?
I think somebody's going to take one down. I think somebody's going to hunt them. I think, not necessarily them going out and looking to shoot one, but somebody's going to be out on a hunting trip, and they're not going to freeze when this thing walks under their deer stand, and we're going to get proof. I think that's really how it's going to happen.
I think I always tell people it'll be a Tesla or an electric truck driving silently around the corner.
Yeah, you may be right, because there's a lot of roadside crossings, and Teslas are pretty quiet.
My son pulled out of the driveway, and I was like, "What's wrong with this picture? He's got a Tesla," but I didn't remember that. So I'm here just pulling out, and I'm hearing this nothing, and I'm like, doesn't make sense. I always think, it could be an electric vehicle.
Those Teslas used to scare the crap out of me when I was a cop, and I was on an extra job directing traffic, and they're like, "Whoa, there's a car," and it wasn't there a second ago. You can hear nothing. They're silent. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is weird. Well, we've kind of come to the end, just about the end. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about your new, the new things you got going on in your podcast, and where they can find you, and if they want to get on your podcast, or they have a story they want to share with you, how do they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. We have a website, sasquatchodyssey.net. We're going to be revamping that. We're sort of, now that we're doing 2-3 shows, we're sort of rebranding into our Paranormal World production studio, and we're going to house all 3 of those shows under there. Nothing's going to change. Everything will be the same, but there'll just be one place. So we'll update that, and eventually when we get the new website going, Danny's working on that feverishly behind the scenes. So once we get the new website up, it'll be Paranormal World Productions, and then you'll find all 3 shows there: Sasquatch Odyssey, True Crime Odyssey, and the Paranormal Odyssey in one home. So you can reach out to us there. If you want to get in touch with me, the best way to do it is email brian@sasquatchodyssey.net. I read those every day. Either Danny reads them and gives them to me, or I read them directly, and we respond to every single email. So if you want to talk, reach out, tell me about your experience, possibly come on the show. We'll definitely do that.
So now you're going to tell me about this darn TV show I keep hearing about that they're filming on your property, and you're not leaving until you do.
So yeah, it was a very interesting show, and I'll give you the brief background. It was basically, it's a Vice show. It's called, I think the episode's called Bigfoot Hunters, and it aired on Vice last night. So if you have Vice TV, I'm sure it'll end up on their YouTube.
So, okay. So tell me about the show though. What are they covering? Are they making fun of the topic, or are they serious about it?
It was very interesting. The name of the show is called In My Own World.
Okay.
So, and my episode is called Bigfoot Hunters, and it was basically people on the fringe of society that have this sort of passion that causes angst amongst, peers, personal relationships, those kind of things. And I'll be honest, I've been honest on the show about, the podcast takes a lot of my time. I'm currently working a 50-hour-a-week retail management position, and I'm doing 3 shows on top of that. So it definitely has its ups and downs, let's say. So the premise of the show was sort of that. It was something I had to think long and hard about. I had to call my friend Matt Pruitt and have a conversation with Matt, because Matt has his head screwed on straight. So, and I think I even had a conversation or 2 with you about it. So, but at the end of the day, I haven't seen the show. I haven't seen the final product. I talked to my mom on the way home today, and she was like, "Yeah, I saw the show last night. It was fantastic. I think they did a really great job." And I'm like, "Well, I'll probably watch it this weekend." So, but yeah, you can check it out on the Vice Network. It's In My Own World, Bigfoot Hunters. That's our episode.
So, but what did they cover in this episode besides you?
It was that was basically it. It was me and the podcast and how much time it takes, and they filmed some really cool things. We got to go to the Bigfoot Museum in Blue Ridge, Georgia, and I did some interviews there, and I think they aired, according to my mom, they aired one of the full interviews that I did, and the girl had a really compelling story that I had to kind of coax out of her on the spot, and she was a really, really good sport. So, but yeah.
Well, that's cool, because Vice obviously has a lot of younger viewers. It's kind of a younger audience, I would imagine.
Yeah, a little bit different demographic than my show. I think my demographic runs the gamut, but I would say, the more millennial folks are checking out Vice. So,
but you realize that over time, because they'll run that show over and over and over, and then it'll run all over the world. And so you're probably going to get, I'll estimate, 70 to 80 million people will see that episode.
It's kind of scary to think
That's
about.
good for business.
I hope so, man. I hope people, the ultimate passion for me is the show. It is the podcast. So it's cool. My number one thing. All 3 of the shows have my heart, and I love doing it. And my plan it's not my plan. At the end of the month, I'm transitioning from my full-time position as a retail manager, and I'm going to be a podcaster full-time, and I'm going to do everything to the podcast. So
that's so cool. I mean, that takes a lot of work, and there's not many people can do that. Not many.
But we can't do it without the audience. So everybody that listens to the shows, I can't thank you enough for that. You keep us on, you keep us coming back week after week. So I can't thank you enough for that. I say it every week on my show.
No, it's a big deal. Congratulations. If you're actually going to do that, that's amazing.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, we're out of time. Thanks so much, Brian. I mean, that's just awesome just talking to you, and I could do it all night. Thank you, Alex. And thank all the people in the chat room. It's always fun to interact a little bit with people. And next week we have Levi. What's Levi's last name, Alex?
Don't ask me to pronounce that. I'll butcher it. Matroveg?
Yeah, it's like our name. It's hard to pronounce. But Levi wrote the Sasquatch Paradox. He'll be our guest next week and should be interesting. But thanks again, everybody. And thanks again, Brian.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug. It's always a pleasure, man.
All right. We're
Thanks,
signing
Brian.
off. Yep.
Bye.